Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I'm your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. I should also say, if you're interested in being notified of when I go live, you can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. And if you have a question that you would like answered on a live stream, you can email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. So let's see. Ellen is here. Welcome. She says, glad you're live tonight. How are you doing tonight, Ellen? Fly free now. Says hello, Dana and everyone. Well, hello, welcome. And while people are kind of trickling in, I'm going to jump to some of the questions that were emailed. So one says, Dear Dana, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for accepting emails and for taking the time to read this. I was in an abusive, narcissistic relationship. Actually, each relationship I've been in has been such. When I found the power to leave my recent relationship, I moved back in with my family. They did not raise me well. They seemed to have glee in the fact that things had gone badly for me. I come from a narcissistic family, lots of abuse, manipulation, emotional abuse, control, all of that. My issue, which is blocking me, is that I knew I needed to get back on my feet in order to not only leave that detrimental relationship, but to also leave my family. I needed to get financially stable, get my own home, and get my self esteem back. I found my own place and I'm currently living off of state benefits to pay the rent. I ran into another roadblock as I attended a local AA meeting to try and find some community and vent my pain. I'm not an alcoholic, I was a fraud, but it felt good to go to a place where I had some support and could look at myself and what I needed to change. The downside was that I fell in with two quote unquote friends, one of which worked the steps with me, and ultimately they both turned out to be narcissists. They used my pain against me, trying to victim blame me, etc. Long story short, I got away from these people and have set appropriate boundaries with family, and I've been focusing on getting myself to a good place before I try to have a romantic relationship. My problem is now that I don't know how to move forward. I have no social support, no partner, and no friend support. Well, at least not really. I'm wanting to train to be an English as a second language teacher and begin making art again and selling art eventually as a business. I want to move to a better apartment and area, and I'd like to have a partner, but I realize that I can't be with anyone until I get back on my feet. Do you have any tips for moving forward? I've been let down and betrayed by everyone who I've recently trusted, so I'm white knuckling it on my own at the moment. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Sure. Okay. So, in terms of tips with moving forward, and it sounds like the main barrier to moving forward is um, just this pervasive fear of distrust in other people. Understandably so. If you've had the kind of this long string of people in your life that have been problematic, and um, so so there's a couple things in terms of finding a support system or a community. There are groups out there called CODA. It's mm, it's a 12-step program, but it's more geared towards codependency. And that word can feel very and can be very emotionally charged for a lot of people. Um, like with anything else, kind of hold on to what helps, let the rest go. But CODA groups, they're free. They're like any other 12-step program. They're worldwide, and they discuss boundaries. That's kind of the focus is on um, um, kind of getting out of, um, work. It's more working on ourselves, working on our relationships and boundaries with other people. So that's a thought. Another thought is meetup.com. I know things are a little bit different now with COVID and everything, but hopefully in the near future, once that gets more under control, meetups will start being in person. I think right now a lot of them are online. So that's another thought in terms of connecting with other people. In terms of, feeling really burned with trusting others and kind of how to move forward with that, I would encourage you, I guess, to lean more into the fact that you can trust yourself. Other people are human, just like we are. They're human and they're gonna make mistakes. And there's that whole range of people out there, from people that are kind of well-intended and make mistakes to your very malicious, sadistic manipulators out there. And I think it can be helpful to kind of take the pressure off of needing to find like a trustworthy person, or needing to find trustworthy people in order to feel safe, and realizing that it's a mixed bag of people out there, but that you can protect you, and that you can rely on you, and uh, that you can trust yourself to do what you need to do in order to keep yourself safe. So while people are, it's the general public, it's a mixed bag. You're going to run across problematic people. They're out there. Um, that you trust yourself to know how to keep yourself safe if and when that happens. So, yes, other people in the chat. Oh, no, this just happens to be this person's name. uh, Spring Fairy VIP kid teacher performer mentioned, says, "Hi, everybody, it's been a while." So this ties into your question as well in terms of employment, English as a second language. There are a couple sites out there. VIP Kid is one of them. And there's another one called Cambly, Cambly, I believe. So it's the Cambly, I think with VIP Kid, they look for people that have like a bachelor's degree. I'm not sure how rigid that requirement is, but Cambly, it's open to the general public. The only requirement, at least last when I saw, was that you are, if people are trying to learn English, that you're a native English speaker. So, um, you set your own hours. It's a great way to make some extra money and to, um, yeah, kind of connect with people from all over the world. Okay. Let's see. And okay, this is from Anonymous. Here's another question who says, I've recently come to the realization that my husband has very strong traits of a psychopath. I've been in denial for 16 years. We've been married. I've rationalized his behavior. I can no longer deny these behaviors are dangerous. I won't go into all the details, but now I'm filled with anxiety and feel a knot in my stomach all the time. I'm unable to concentrate at work. I need to get out of this marriage with my two children, and I'm scared to leave because he has a very vengeful personality, and I've seen what he does to people who have quote unquote done him wrong in the past. My plan is to leave this summer while he's on a work trip. We live halfway across the country from my family. Can I legally take our children to another state? I'm really worried that if I divorce him, he might get joint custody and I won't be able to move. He is in the military, and because we move so frequently, I don't have any family or friends where we currently live. I also don't know how to cope and act like everything is fine until then. Thank you. Your podcast has been very helpful to me. Oh boy. Well, I think your best bet is to contact an attorney. That's what I would do. Is get some legal advice there. And I would also encourage you to contact a local domestic violence shelter in the area that you're in, and talk to them as well. So, and maybe I would do that before you contact an attorney. Actually, I would. I would contact your local domestic violence agency first. And while you're talking to an advocate there, I would see if they have any legal resources. Oftentimes, they're connected with attorneys who do who'll give free consultations, who are familiar with abuse type cases, and see if you can speak to an attorney there. It's kind of what's legal and what's not legal. It gets a little bit muddy, especially when there's um, when there's fear involved, and when there's this fear of this person, and this person is very vengeful, and at a minimum that's psychologically abusive. So fear is not a normal emotion to experience in a relationship. So I would contact them. I would see about creating a safety plan, and um, what would all that would involve. So, oh, that's so scary. And I wish you the best. And um, I would be curious to know if you've reached out to any of your family and friends, if they kind of know what's going on. There's online support groups out there. Uh, I have a couple, um, thriveafterabuse.com. Um, yeah, I would just encourage you to get as much support as you can during this time. So, okay, so let's hop into the chat. Okay, let me scroll up here. Spring Fairy's talking about her experience with VIP Kid. She said, it's been a great job. Been doing it for 3 years now. I may change my name up, LOL. But this teaching English as a second language gave me the independence and stability as a single mom for the first time ever. Yeah, that's wonderful. I had a friend, well, I think she still might work with VIP, was doing that. Um, yeah, I want to say like about 20 hours or so a week. And she was really great at it. And I think she really enjoyed it. So, yeah, just some options. There's uh, quite a few options these days, especially with teaching English as a second language. Yeah, Ellen said online opportunities are great now. She's been doing it. Ellen's been doing it for 25 years. She says she is an ESL teacher, but Arabic to English. Wow, that's really cool. Ellen says, I am in recovery, but I prefer online when it comes to narcissistic recovery. Okay, yeah. Let's see. Let me scroll down here. Changing My Life is here. Huffle Mom says, do you like, Dana, do you like the revised public service announcement list here? Let's see. I don't read them. I just know I haven't looked them over. So I can't give you a good answer on that. So let me read them real quick here. Okay, tells people how to tag me, tells them tag isn't a guarantee that your text will be seen. Yes, that is very true. If I do not answer your question, it's not because I don't think it's a good one, or it's not because I'm avoiding you or anything like that. Um, I stop the chat when I'm thinking and talking because I can't. I could get very easily distracted. I can't do everything all at once. So I tend to miss questions that way. I do the best I can, and the moderators here do what they can to catch my attention. So um, if I'm not getting to you, try to get their attention, and they'll get my attention. And let's see. Huffle Mom says basically, if we get trolls, do not handle them yourself. Let an admin know. Yep. Yeah, all that looks awesome. Jack is saying, Please be gentle, chat. I am in a great deal of physical and psychological pain. Oh my goodness, what's going on? Oh, very cool. Lori says, I got my social security card with my maiden name. Finally did it after 3 years of a divorce. Getting my real ID next month, hoping to find a deeper me now. Oh, that's wonderful. Isn't it like a kind of getting a piece of yourself back? I'm happy for you, and I'm thrilled for this kind of next chapter in your life. Okay, here's another question that I had emailed from me, who says, Dear Dana, hope you're doing well. I'm currently reading a book on verbal and emotional abuse. I'm on the part of methods of sabotage, and some of the methods used are fostering chaos, telling lies or half truths, procrastination, being chronically late, being ambiguous, instructing, and withholding affirmation. There are a few more. My question is, when getting to know someone, I can identify red flags, for instance, procrastination and instructing out of the list. But this doesn't mean it needs to be attributed to emotional abuse. It could be due to other reasons such as depression, anxiety, etc. I think this is where I got tripped up in my last relationship because I saw red flags, but I attributed it to something else. Can you please explain the best way to identify red flags as a sign of abuse and not due to something else? Thanks so much for your help, Ava. Great question. So you're absolutely right. And as I was reading the list, I'm like, oh, kind of there's some of this stuff in here that feeling a little called out on. Really describes some ADD kind of stuff. So, yeah, I can see your confusion with the overlap there. Um, and you're absolutely right. Certain certain traits like procrastination, being chronically late, um, even withholding affirmation. Actually, really, all of these can be multiple. Could for there could be a multitude of things going on. It doesn't necessarily mean that that person's uh, you know uh, going to be abusive or that it's going to escalate or any of that. However, with that said, I would say that regardless of what's going on, that any of those things are concerning. So whenever there's a concern in a relationship, it's worth bringing up. And the biggest red flag I think you can look for is if you bring concerns up and your concerns are dismissed, they're invalidated, you're shamed for it, the person completely shuts down, they don't want to talk about it, um, they spin it back on you, they deflect, and they make it seem like, oh, well, you know what, you're just overly emotional. You just make a big deal out of nothing, that kind of stuff. That's a problem. So it's not, especially with this kind of stuff, uh, although fostering chaos is outside of, I would say, the realm of normal problematic behavior. Uh, but even still, anything like that is concerning and worth addressing. So, I did a whole red flag series, and I have such mixed emotions about that. And if you watch the show, you've probably heard me talk about this because I was hoping it would help to clarify things, but I feel really it kind of made it worse for this exact reason that people tend to um, look at the signs themselves and they're okay. Well, if I know enough of the red flags, then that'll protect me from getting tangled up with another abusive person. But every abusive person's different, and they abuse in different ways, and there's too many variables at play. So, and like you said too, there's things that overlap. So it's not necessarily indicative of them being abusive. They could have other things going on. So it's more about how are your boundaries in a relationship, and how is your level of assertiveness. So if something's problematic to you, how comfortable are you able to bring it up? And um there's, I mean, there's times too, like some things are worth bringing up, some things are just worth ending the date and being like, oh no, absolute deal breaker, I'm done. So not every concern you have necessarily needs to be addressed. I mean, and that's the difference between um, or not maybe the difference, but that's kind of in knowing that it's okay to have deal breakers. So if someone really crosses the line with you, you don't need to talk about it and try to get clarity and give them the benefit of the doubt and all of that. If it's whatever your line is, if they are way too aggressive, if they are um, really wanting to talk about sex and kind of just crossing boundaries that you might have early on, it's okay to just be done. But for me, that those signs of emotional availability and effective communication are huge, absolutely huge. Yes, some abusers can fake it. They can pretend to be really interested in effective communication and really care about these things and really want to be solutions oriented. But I mean, I think it just takes a while to see anybody's behavior clearly, but you'll see it clearly. Just kind of go slow and um, have your boundaries, your standards, and your deal breakers in place, and knowing how to handle these situations if and when they surface. That's it. That's huge. And realizing that you don't need concrete proof of a problem, that feeling ongoing mental anguish, crazy making, feeling emotionally exhausted, feeling hypervigilant and distrustful of this person. If they have squirrely behavior, they're hiding their phone from you, or they're overly possessive of their phone. They're just something's off. Like you can't quite pinpoint what, but something's off. Like you don't need to wait for concrete proof that they really are, lying, cheating, stealing, this kind of thing to get some distance. The concrete proof in those situations is the crazy making. It's the mental anguish. It's that perpetual feeling that something's off. None of that's normal. And, um, if certain feelings like that were to even surface in a sincere, between like two sincere people, there's that desire to get things resolved. And those situations don't keep happening. It's only when manipulation is at foot do these situations continue to happen. So, okay. Spring Fairy says, I have been single for nearly 3 years. I dated one person briefly last year. Unfortunately, I learned that I still have yet to figure out how to set firm boundaries. 4 weeks of yearly therapy and not there. Yeah, boundaries, all of it. It's new skills, and it can really be tricky. And that's kind of the challenging thing is it's one thing to practice these skills or even to discuss these skills in therapy or with a friend or whatnot, but it's another thing to be in the thick of it in the moment. And and like I was saying earlier, every person is different, and so every time we get our boundaries pushed, it's probably going to be in a different way, and that can start to feel very discouraging. Like, oh man, I still haven't gotten it all figured out, and oh, it can feel very defeating. And I just want you to know, like, it still happens to me too. So I guess try not to be so hard on yourself. It's, um, boundaries get pushed in a wide variety of ways. It's more about being able to shorten the time that it takes for us to see the boundaries that have been pushed. Whereas before, it might have taken years until things grew to such an outrageously problematic level that we were forced to see it. We're like, oh my gosh, okay, yeah. Like the gal that wrote the letter about her husband, she's like 16 years married to this guy. I finally realized he's really dangerous, and I'm terrified. It took her 16 years to break through that denial and the justification that goes along with it. That's unfortunately really common. And I think it's one of the biggest kind of misnomers out there with people that have been in an abusive relationship. They think, oh, well, if it's happened once, it won't happen again. Like, I'll know what to look out for next time. And in some ways, yes, but in some ways, no, because again, everybody's different. And same with abusive people, they're all different and they all come across differently. So it's not a, it's, that's the whole kind of, it's about progress, not perfection. And, again, like, and hindsight's always 2020. So it's, I guess, try to give yourself some grace and compassion for, uh, for doing what you could at the time. And I know that's so much easier said than done because that whole hindsight's 2020, but it's a journey and it's there's lots of lessons out there. So yeah, Spring Fairy says totally. I just stopped dating again. One of the things too that can help is to think about, um, is there a pattern to any type of manipulations that you're missing? Because and the reason I ask that is because sometimes if we have if we're unaware of a vulnerability that we have, and we all have vulnerabilities, it's all part of being human. But if you're unaware of a certain vulnerability, then that can be really feeding into your behavior and into why you're kind of glossing over certain manipulations. So, for example, if a person, I'll speak for myself, I was getting really caught up with love bombing time and time again. In part, I didn't realize it was problematic. I thought it was, well, this is what it's supposed to be, right? I mean, this is a fairy tale. This is so romantic and I felt so beautiful and so alive and so seen, and that I had no idea that that could be a problem for somebody to come across like that. And but that was kind of the ongoing issue. And same with friendships too. It was people that were very quick, that wanted to move me into their inner circle and just kind of these whirlwind type situations. And then I realized, I'd been walking around for a very long time feeling unloved and unimportant. And so that was why I was glossing over that and wanting uh, to believe that it was all true. So once I was able to identify that vulnerability and to see that kind of love bombing, moving very quickly, the whirlwind type situations as the problem that they are, then that spell was broken. It was I never saw them as the appeal was gone. It was just kind of like, oh no, this is not something that's ideal or healthy. This is in fact, best case scenario, a sign of another really lonely person, or a sign of emotional immaturity, or a sign of a person that's really lonely and emotionally immature. So, oh, thanks, Gary, for the live stream donation. And he says, thank you for your help and wisdom. Your videos have helped me out a bunch. I like your saying of avoiding projects when picking partners. Thanks, Gary. Yeah. Well, I'm glad. It's helpful to kind of to realize that there's, in what I was just saying too, Gary, in terms of looking at different patterns and relationships. And frankly, I would encourage everybody to take some time and do this, is to write out a list of the different significant relationships that you've had over the years, over the past, let's say 20 years, depending on how old you are, of friendships of with significant others. And then write down kind of what you think attracted you to this person. And and just so you're just writing down adjectives. Like, oh, this person was funny, they were likable, they were um, really friendly, maybe they were um, confident, they were kind of, how would you describe this person in like 10 adjectives or less? And then kind of go through the list and then circle the ones that repeat. And there's a good pointer in terms of a pattern. And also kind of a good pointer in terms of getting at that deeper vulnerability that's meeting. I'm not sure what you mean with that, Gareth. He says, was there a specific incident that made you start the whole in healing journey? Can you explain a little more what you mean? Like, you mean the focus on the healing journey, or? Okay. And hopefully while you're typing, I'm going to scroll up and see. Okay, here, Spring Fairy was saying, yes, Dana, it's true. I was willing to accept crumbs because I wanted attention from him. It's a self-worth issue from my narcissistic mother, my narc mom upbringing. I had lowered my standards fast. Yeah, well, it's wonderful that you're able to see that. And working on that self-worth and raising standards to where crumbs are just off the table is, I think it takes time. And unfortunately, kind of like with most things, sometimes it takes us getting burned a few times to really reinforce that lesson of, crumbs are not going to keep you satisfied. They're going to, as the saying goes, crumbs don't keep a person satisfied, they keep you starving. And in relationships, people get, uh, the more kind of hungry they are for love and affection, the more they're willing to sacrifice important parts of themselves in order to fit in or to keep that other person happy. And at the end of those relationships, um, you're kind of left with a shell of yourself, and that's incredibly painful. Um, Okay, Gareth just says yes. That's his elaboration. Was there a specific incident that made you start the whole healing journey? Oh boy. There were so many. And I think, looking back on it is different. I see it differently than I did at the time. So probably the one that sticks out to me the most is and I've shared this before, but the red, actually it's in the sink right now. I have a black coffee cup with me today, but my red mug that I normally have, I realized um, after my relationship with Jack, I was so upset and like it was seriously so depressing. I was in this trashed house and just kind of had nothing and this empty house, and I mean it was in the middle of nowhere. Um, it was awful. And so I was taking a shower one night and I was just crying. And I like I just was overwhelmed and just sad and all kinds of emotions, and was just crying and started to kind of get angry and realize, you know what? If like kind of why doesn't anybody love me? Like that was the thought. Just feeling really sad and very down about myself. And then realizing, well, you know what? If basically if I like if he can't love me, well, then I'm going to love me. And that was more out of an anger, like than anything else. I go, well, then I'm going to love me. And then kind of the next thought was, well, wait a minute. Like, does that mean that I didn't love me before? Like, have I not been loving me? Like, what does that even mean? And then it kind of just spiraled this whole train of thought of what does it really mean to love myself? And, um, uh, have I been loving myself? And it was, I guess that was the first, well, at least at this point, like one of the first times I can remember realizing I was looking for love from outside of myself, mainly from the people I was dating. So if I wasn't loved by somebody, I didn't feel loved. And that was just very like very eye-opening for me. And so then I decided, okay, because I have a terrible memory, so I'm like, okay, I've got to remember this, like this is a good one. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to remember this? And it was okay, I'm going to designate a color to remind myself to love myself. And so then I decided, well, not terribly creative here, but I'm like, okay, red, right? Love myself. So I I went out and I bought some red towels and I bought a red mug. And so that way, when I would get out of the shower, it was like hugging myself. So I would just hug myself in this red towel. And um, that really started me down this path of kind of questioning and introspection and what does this mean to what does it mean to love myself? And you've probably heard me talk about this next part of what I'm going to say here is the realization of I was like, well, I don't know, like what does it mean to love myself? Like I guess I don't hate myself, but like what does that look like to love yourself? And I really didn't know. And the only things I could think of when people are like, "Oh yeah, I love myself." It was almost like this level of false confidence or arrogance. It didn't seem really authentic to me. And so then I realized, okay, if I swap out the word love with the word value, like thinking about a person like a person like a classic car collector, I think is what I was thinking of at the time. Like so I was thinking like, okay, in what other ways do we love people or things? Like how do we show love to other people or things? And then it was like, okay, if there's love, then we cherish it, we value. And it was like, okay, value. Well, what if I were to swap out that word love with the word value? Like, do I value myself? And then that really clicked. And I was like, oh, well, okay. Well, when you put it that way, like, do I value my time? Do I value my energy? Do I value my emotions? Do I value my body? Do I value my environment? Do I value the friendships and the significant people in my life? And that it was a huge turning point. So, um, but really, I think diving deep into that healing part of the journey, that for well, that took a couple years. I was so full of anger and mainly anger, I think, probably sadness too. Anger, sadness, just embarrassment, shame. There was a lot of shame uh, that I I was more focused on trying to understand like narcissists and sociopathic behavior and that kind of thing. And so I really poured myself into that. And when I really began to realize, kind of all of the answers are within us, that was when I guess my message about um, kind of interacting with problematic people began to really change because once you're grounded enough in yourself and you have your boundaries, your standards, your deal breakers, uh, it uh, that's a big part in how we get our self-esteem back and um, feeling capable and confident of navigating life and all of that. So yeah. Okay, let me scroll. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I hope it did. Okay, Gareth was saying, was there something that made you work on your recovery from emotional abuse? I'm sorry if I'm not making sense. Well, um, I mean, after my experience with Jack, my world felt blown apart. Kind of my whole understanding, I guess, of the world and how it worked was radically shaken. And, here I was at the time, I was an advocate at a domestic violence shelter. And I taught classes on on abuse and how to, um, you know, kind of spot abusive people and boundaries and standards and deal breakers and all of that stuff. So I was, in the trenches every day with this. And so it really uh, rocked my world when I realized, oh my gosh, here I'd been this whole time sharing my life with the person who, at the end of it, was a complete pathological liar, and then at the end of it, who I was pretty certain was trying to kill me. It's like, how does that happen, and how do you not realize it? So that really threw me for a loop, and it was more of, at first, it was healing in terms of, I had a lot of anger, and I had a lot of, uh, I was having night terrors. Like I was having a lot of PTSD type symptoms, and I needed help coping. So that was kind of what started me started me down on that path. Then it took me a while to realize that what I had experienced was emotionally and psychologically abusive. Like years after that. Um, because it wasn't overt stuff. It wasn't, I had been in a relationship when I was in high school with a guy who was very, verbally, it was kind of more of like the stereotype of an abusive person. That was not my experience this time around with Jack or with Steve. So it took me a while to identify like what I had experienced. Um, and even then, gosh, and it's been so long, it didn't, I guess I didn't realize that that was something that I could or that I needed to heal from. I happened to stumble across, and I forget the website now. It was a random website about sociopaths. This was like 10 plus years ago now, where she had mentioned something, and this woman had gone through uh, a very similar situation, but she was married for like 23 years to this guy who was everything about him was a lie. And she'd made the comment about kind of using kind of what happened to her, or like what happened to her ended up in many ways kind of being one of the best things that happened to her, because it just kind of woke her up in a lot of ways and made her reconnect with herself. And I remember just being so stunned by that, because that was the first time it had dawned on me that something good could come from what I'd experienced. Whereas before I kind of thought, well, I just have to live feeling broken. That's it. I have to settle for like a diminished life, was how I felt. And realizing that there were other alternatives out there was huge for me. And that was when I guess that would be it. That was when I really began like, okay, well, then how can um, I move forward, and how can um, um, how do I not feel broken? Like how do I put my life back together? And yeah, I guess saying it out loud, that was the big catalyst for me. Oh, well, thank you so much, Jessica. She says, I absolutely love your channel. I originally came across you while listening to podcasts. By far, you have become one of my favorites. Thank you endlessly. And, oh, thank you for your kind words. That really means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. And thank you for the live stream donation. Oh, thanks, Huffle Mom. She says, yeah, I thoroughly recommend Dana's book, The Narcissist's Playbook. Well, thank you. Yeah, there's lots of talk in there about manipulation. And then on the other side of it, kind of what we can do to kind of protect ourselves against it. And um, Yeah, it's frustrating because these skills, they're not taught, they're not discussed, they're very rarely role modeled, and um, of course, people get caught up in it because how, like, I mean, it's when we're taught that the world kind of works a certain way and that people are inherently good and that you got to forgive and forget and that commitment's forever and that nobody's perfect and that relationships take work and love conquers all and all of these messages can, of course, if people subscribe to that, of course they're going to get caught up in it. And that's what's so frustrating is nobody talks about these messages are only valid if they're within that healthy context of healthy boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. So yeah, there um, needs to be more information about this out there. Changing My Life says, oh, now that I'm healthier, I have no idea where to find someone anyhow. Yeah, and that can be kind of a challenge. Online dating, I swear, I'm seeing more and more stuff online from people. It's horrifying that what online the cesspool that like online dating has turned into is beyond disgusting. Just kind of an FYI. Uh, I think ladies and particularly out there, men have their own challenges. I'm not knocking that, but this has become kind of a new thing with, especially with online dating, is this concept of a quote unquote nice guy, where a guy will basically say, "Oh, I'm I'm a good guy. I'm nice. They might show some sort of interest. They might come across as really polite, but then as soon as you set a boundary or say that you're not interested, they do a 180 and then lash out with really, really awful, like verbal abuse, really awful. And they don't think anything of it. And it's kind of just become I would say, sadly enough, kind of the new normal for online dating. So I would just encourage you to kind of to keep your shields up when you're out there, that this is becoming more and more prevalent, and just realize that there's a whole kind of segment of uh, I don't know, really angry, hateful people out there. So proceed with caution. Just remember, what they're saying is a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of you. You do not need to own it. And it's completely understandable if you have your feelings hurt by that, because it's hateful, hurtful things that are being said. But remember, you can always keep your hurt feelings and your self worth in two different buckets. And I would encourage you to do so. So, because some people just feel better about themselves by tearing others down. And that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Mm. Jack says, oh, snap. I felt that. If someone doesn't love me, I don't feel loved. He said that one went right to the heart. Yeah. Isn't it wild how like kind of have certain insights like that, and you're like, oh, okay, yep, that's exactly what's going on. I would be curious to know, for those of you that have been around for a while, Jack and Hufflemom especially, um yeah, if you'd be open to share, not maybe not tonight, I don't want to put you on the spot, but tonight if you want to, or next week, some of the kind of pivotal shifts in your healing or pivotal shifts in like your mindset. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Ellen says, my last straw was, I know I'm a great person, so why is this narc constantly cheating, lying, abusing? I Googled and found Dana and Angie's videos, and that spoke to my soul. I decided, that's it. I can't live like this. I had a heart. I had a heart attack the next week. I decided I have no more chances. Wow. She says, we all have greatness in us, but if we lose sight of it, Yeah, it's a problem. Yep. That's another one of those kind of like problematic beliefs that are floating around out there. Sort of like, well, if your spouse is cheating, then it must be of something to do with you, that you're you know, that they're not getting what they need at home, and that's why they're out there cheating. And the reality is, no. I mean, sometimes that happens, but for a lot of people, they cheat just because they can, because they're bored, because they're horny, because the opportunity presents itself. It has nothing to do with who they have at home and how happy, or quote unquote happy, they are with their partner or at home. So realizing that can is it's important, because it's very easy for people, I think, to get caught up in thinking, okay, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to change? What do I need to work on in order to try to keep my partner faithful? But yeah, that's it's not about that. So um, and at the end of the day, it's not um, it's that kind of behavior. It's boundary busting, and it's it's destructive. It's so destructive in a relationship, and it's completely okay and understandable to leave. I've seen so many people that are like, okay, but I value marriage. I value marriage. And it's like, yep. And that's the problem, right? That's the problem, is you're married to somebody who doesn't value marriage. And boy, did they choose right. So here they are out running amok, and you're the one that values the marriage, but they don't. And so kind of realizing that, of like, oh, okay, okay. Like, I can't be the only one here who's trying to make this work. Like, it doesn't work. It's exhausting. And it can lead to some major physical issues. That's like the stress and everything that you were describing. It's just so destructive. So um, I accidentally just slurped my water. I hope you didn't hear me slurping in the microphone. If you did, I apologize. Changing my life says, oh my God, yes, the love conquers all. You just need to love them more. Yeah, that's another one. If I just love this person enough, that I can somehow squeeze all of their broken pieces back together again. If I can just, with more religion, if they can just find God, then that'll change them. If they get into rehab, that'll change them. If they get into therapy, if they, uh, you know, all of these things. And the reality is, the person's not going to change and until they're really ready to change. But even then, that's the thing, is I think you have to ask yourself, like, play the situation out. If that person did change, how would you know? Like, how do you know if that person changed or if they just got better at hiding it? Seriously, like, think about it that way. And then think about, where are you going to be in 5 or 10 years from here? 5 or 10 years from now, if you stay in this relationship, what is your mental health going to look like? And how, like, what's their plan for how to kind of rebuild trust? And is that something that you even want to try to do? Because apologies don't fix stuff like that. It's, at a minimum, it requires living a life of full transparency. But even then, the person that's on the receiving end of that kind of destructive behavior, it contributes to all of that mental anguish and insecurity and doubt and all of that. And that's a really difficult way to live. So, okay, let's see. Oh, awesome. Rosa says, I continue to struggle with self-love. That's not the awesome part. The rest of the question's awesome. Uh, I continue to struggle with self-love, what it looks like, and I'm working on it. That's awesome. Good for you. I'm reading The Body Keeps the Score, and I tried an EMDR therapist, and honestly, this session was like magic. Yeah, it really is. It's cool stuff. Uh, Person goes on to say the EMDR session was much more productive for me than standard talk therapy sessions. Both are valuable, but I walked away from the EMDR session feeling fully accomplished with a breakthrough. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm such a huge fan of EMDR now. Um, now that I've seen what it can do, it's very enlightening, very, very enlightening. And there can be some pretty significant shifts at the end of just one session. And what's cool too is if you can get, if the therapist, well, if the two of you, the therapist and you, can access kind of like a touchstone memory or a pretty significant one, there can almost be the, I like to call them like minesweeper moments. If you're familiar with that old game, like I don't know, I might be really dating myself here. It's an old computer game where you would click on spaces and then every now and again you'd get one, you'd hit a square and it would just clear out this whole field. And that's kind of how sometimes EMDR can work like that. It's where you work on uh, one limiting belief and shifting that to an empowering belief, and it works not only on the issue that you're working on, but then quite a few others as well. So it's cool. Cool, cool. Let's see. Let's see. Huffle Mom says Minesweeper. Yeah. Are you familiar? You guys are probably familiar with that game. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Um, Paige says, I'm 6 years free of being married to a malignant narcissist for 17 years. Every day I'm away from him still isn't enough time. Freedom feels great. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that you are free and enjoying this next chapter in your life. That's wonderful. Uh, See, Jack says, Dana, I'm just going to, okay, I think I'm missing part of this. But he says, I'm just going to be blunt. It's possible for narcissistic mothers to crush the sexual confidence of their sons, especially if their abuse is sexualized. Makes sense. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, sexual abuse doesn't have to be um, physical. Like there's a range of behaviors that falls under sexual abuse. So yeah, whenever that's for men or women, whenever there's um, um, sexual abuse or sexualized abuse or um, anything like that that impacts a person's relationship with their own with sex and sexuality, it's very understandable that that's going to be carried forward. And uh, yeah, there's a lot of men out there that have experienced all different kinds of abuse, emotional, psychological, sexual, physical, you name it, and uh, oftentimes don't realize what they've experienced because there's still that kind of understanding that women are victims and men are abusers. This doesn't confuse just men; it confuses people, same-sex couples. Two guys or two women. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that over the years of, oh, I just didn't think that it was an abusive relationship because I was in another relationship with a woman and I just didn't think that women could be abusive. I've shared in the past, I had a friendship that was very like emotionally and psychologically abusive, very manipulative. And I didn't identify that as manipulative or abusive for a very long time. And if anything, but what's strange is I would describe it as that to people. I would say, "Oh, um, it's like I'm in an abusive relationship with her." And that's exactly what it was. It felt like that, but it didn't match my idea of what an abusive relationship was at that point in my life. But now I realize, nope, that's exactly what it was. Controlling and um, a little manipulative and awful. So, okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Um, oh, wait, let me scroll up because I think I'm missing part of this. Truth Seeker says, it's so weird. I have a goofy inner child, but their inner child is more of an aggressive comedian. It's so tricky. The comedian feels like a tightrope sometimes. Hmm. Well, here's the thing with um, if we're having a part of ourself that feels more like a comedian, if you have the kind of the inner child, or if you're more into like internal family systems where there's different types of parts, where especially aggressive comedian, that to me seems more like a protective part. So comedy is often used as a defense mechanism. It helps to keep us safe. It helps to kind of divert the issue. It helps to minimize things. It helps us to avoid being assertive or directly assertive. And so I would explore what um, kind of why that part insists on using comedy and what it's trying to protect you from. So, especially aggressive comedy. There's, um, yeah, often, like I said, oftentimes it's a diversion from being real. It's in a way that feels safe and in a way that feels socially acceptable. People are talking about lie detectors in terms of telling, I'm guessing, when people are lying. So let's see. Let me see if I can scroll up and find more of this. Um, yeah. Well, and here's the thing with lie detectors. Lie detectors don't detect if somebody's lying. They detect the physiological signs that tend to accompany when a person is lying, such as increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, changes in temperature, it just changes in your vital signs. But that assumes that that a person doesn't, or that a person has, um, a person only tends to feel flustered when they're lying if they are experiencing kind of guilt and shame and remorse. If that's not really present, if they feel very entitled to whatever they've done, or if they've, you know, it doesn't take a lot to fake out a lie detector. They've read a few articles on Google. They've practiced kind of, you know, kind of mindfulness techniques, really slowing their breathing, becoming more, um, centered and grounded. You can pass it. This is why, uh, lie detectors are generally not allowed in court as evidence because the fallibility is high. UNA says, Yeah, Dana, that's what got me too. It's how in the world can I have been trained in these things yet missed it in my private life? Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's hard. I think in part, whenever there's an emotional, you know, whenever we have an emotional investment in a person, it's we tend to err more on that side of wanting to give them the benefit of the doubt and kind of glossing over certain things that might be a problem because we have feelings for them and we care about them. And uh, that can be a big part of why we don't see this kind of behavior clearly. Not to mention, there's that huge divide between um, even at like a clinical level, like what we're taught about narcissists and sociopaths. And or not even just that, but I think mental health in general. We all have this idea of what a person with ADD looks and acts like, what a person with schizophrenia looks like and acts like, what a person with antisocial personality disorder looks and acts like. And that's it's so unfortunate because those are all biases that you could have like there's a range, right, of ways that people can and do present, and there's a range that their behavior can and does come across. And so I so I think it's kind of one thing to have this idea of, oh, okay, I think I can spot this behavior, but it's another thing when we live it and we're on the receiving end of it. It just completely, you know, can rock a person. And um, especially kind of personality disordered stuff, because it's especially if you get caught up with somebody who's intelligent enough to say enough of the right things and knows enough to kind of minimize certain other things. So Truth Seeker says online is such a portal of chaos. Oh, that's a great way to put it. Yes, it is. Gareth asks, hey Dana, have you ever thought about writing memoirs? I'm sorry, I don't want to hog the chat. Thank you for your lovely answers to my questions. Um, I have thought about writing uh, a memoir of sorts. It's, I don't know, we'll see. We'll see if that ever happens. I'm not quite sure. I think I'd want to, yeah, but I've thought about it and some different ways I would like to do it. Yeah, we'll see. Um, oh, that's another good one. Brooks mentions another worst cliche ever is you get what you give. Yes, that's another damaging one. Yeah, terrible. Not always true. And Faith and Joy says, my mother lies and tells stories about me that are totally made up to get people to feel sorry for her. Yikes. How, I'm curious to know, how long did it take for you to realize that? Like, did you realize, and I don't know how old you are, but did you realize that when you were a child, or was it not until you were an adult? Let's see here. Let me scroll up. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Um, Camilla says, I recently broke no contact with my parents after more than 6 years, and it seems like my mom isn't too bad and has me feeling like maybe I'm the problem. Well, I guess I would encourage you to think about, okay, well, why did you break no contact with them? And to get kind of clear with yourself, I would say it can be a little, and again, I don't know you, I don't know your situation, but uh, it can be a little concerning when, you know, assuming that there were valid reasons as to why you went no contact with your parents. Um, when you kind of somehow reopen contact, if there's no accountability or acknowledgement of any wrongdoing on their side, and it's kind of minimized and then spun around to make it seem like, okay, well, you're the one with the problem, then that's concerning. So unless, um, yeah, so I don't know. I would have to know more about kind of what's going on. Sometimes with dysfunctional families, the and again, you just obviously you need to do what you need to do and in order to keep yourself safe and sane. So whatever that looks like, I'm not advocating for things one way or another, but I think oftentimes in a dysfunctional family, the the skills and the ability we have to kind of like set boundaries, to be assertive, to um, kind of detach from these things, from deeply dysfunctional behavior. It changes as we get distance from that, and as we get older, and as we learn new skills like being assertive and setting boundaries. So the relationship we might have with our parents when we're, say, 19 might be is well it is it's going to be very different, especially if we're learning all of these things in, when we're 23 or when we're 33 or 73. It's going to change. So um yeah, I guess that's kind of something to keep in mind. It doesn't mean that they're going to change, but to your ability to be able to protect yourself is is going to, I guess you're going to have more tools in your toolkit is what I'm going to say. Is another way to say that. And again, I'm not advocating for you to reopen contact or to go back to no contact. It's whatever you feel is right. But um, you know, it's sometimes I think a lot of times it's trial and error of, okay, if we're gonna try to have some sort of semblance of a relationship, then this is where it helps for you to get in tune with, okay, I need to take action from a place of interest of, okay, I would like to go see my parents, but realizing, okay, I needed to do this with boundaries. Like they might be like, oh, come stay with us for a week and we really want to see you and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, well, maybe this time will be, things will be different. Set yourself up for success. So, when it's time to, like, to get a breather, when if you're around them and after an hour or 3 hours you're close to pulling your hair out, then okay, this isn't going to work. So meeting with them in a place, either if you're going to go over there, um, go someplace where you can leave, where you're not trying to get them to leave. So if you go visit, you go over there. And then you also maybe get a hotel so you're not staying there. So if you are going to try to have like a low contact type of dynamic with them, it's you're not jumping back into it. It's you're giving yourself enough breathing room to where you have a place Like you have an escape plan where you can get back to a hotel and just breathe, or uh, that you're not feeling obligated to stay there for a full week. Maybe you only stay in town for a few days, or one day, or an afternoon. It's, really depends on you. But um, kind of learning also how to kind of get out of certain conversations and just get physical distance. This is difficult. I think this is one of the more difficult skills for children who grow up in dysfunctional homes, because the message when you grow up in dysfunction is you don't have a voice, you don't have a say, and your opinion doesn't matter. So the result is we just learn to sit there and take it. And as adults, we hopefully learn that we don't have to do that. Even if they're your parents, especially if they're parents, you don't have to do that anymore. So um, the way that you interact with them, shifting it and being like, okay, I need this to be a relationship that's more based on that mutuality. And I need to figure out kind of where my limits are. So this works for me too. And, uh, kind of setting some boundaries. So if uncomfortable topics do surface, that you're anticipating that, and then kind of have a plan of what are you going to do when that happens, and kind of what are some of the points that you want to stay assertive with, and what are some of the points that you're going to just save for another time. So, okay, let's see. Karen says, I'm super proud of myself as I've not checked up on his social media for 6 months now. Awesome. Good job. Good job. Good job. Yeah, one of the kind of the mantras I had when I was fresh out was well, there's a couple of them, but reminding myself, the best revenge is a good life. The best revenge is a good life. The best revenge is a good life. And then another one was some sort of meme I saw floating around on the internet. This was actually, I guess, around the time of Steve, but it was uh, Yoda. It was written in like Yoda speak. If um, something along the lines of your ex's profile, Facebook profile, you must go, only pain you will find. And I thought that, yeah, it was cute. It's so true. Like there's nothing to see there. There's nothing to see there. It's nothing for you. There's nothing for you there. It's all, you know, there might be some jabs taken at you. There might be, um, some things to try to make you jealous, or him kind of just going on living his daily life, which could evoke all kinds of emotions in you. Like there's no point. There's nothing there. So yeah, good for you for just driving on. Oh, very cool. Jack was saying someone wrote in the comments yesterday that she really liked "The Best Revenge is a Good Life" and she pinned it to her board. I think she meant her Pinterest board. Yeah. Yeah, that man, I leaned on that statement so heavy. It carried me through some really dark times. And it also gave me a direction in which to really pour that anger and rage into, because I like I was so overwhelmed with it. I didn't know what to do. And um, just the injustice of it all, for somebody to treat you so terribly and then have no consequences. And then you're like, in my case, I had to leave. So I left for a couple of reasons. I mean, the main one being we lived in this house that was kind of way up a mountain, and there was no way I could live up there by myself. It was too much work. I didn't feel safe. It was intimidating living where we lived. And I had this rental property that would have been trashed that I needed to fix up, and all of this. So to kind of go from living this great life and everything to just living in shambles was really I don't even know what the word is. Yeah, just injustice, the not fair, not fair. So Camilla says, Dana, yes, thank you. Yes, she asked if she could visit my place, and I told her I'll come to her and that I wanted to take baby steps. I felt proud and could tell she was taken aback some. Good for you. Good for you for drawing that line and for thinking about, okay, yeah, how, if I'm going to do this, how am I going to get myself into, like, kind of back into some sort of dynamic with my mother? But then how can I kind of stay safe too, and be able to get some distance if, well, if and when need be? And that's really I think such a great way to do it, is what do you have control over, what do you not have control over? It's a heck of a lot easier to here's another thing too, with these kinds of things, because some people really struggle with boundaries. I get it, I totally get it. Especially when parents are involved. Think of it in terms of managing expectations. You're helping to manage it. This is something that you're doing for you, but it's also something that you're doing for the other person. It sets both people up for success. So going to her place and setting the expectation ahead of time, mom, I'd love to come see you Saturday. I've got quite a bit of things going on. I'd love to see you. I might only be able to stay for maybe 45 minutes or so. And you're setting that expectation with her, so she knows, okay, 45 minutes. And then if you're there and if things are going okay and you're like, I think I want to stay for another 30 minutes or so, then you can. It's much easier to kind of set the expectation small and then have it grow than it is to be like, oh yeah, I'll spend all afternoon with you, and then 45 minutes into it you're like, oh my god, please somebody get me out of here. So yeah, just some thoughts with that. Uh, okay, let's see. Let me scroll. Hmm. Jennifer, I have never heard of that. I would be curious to see if there's any actual research on that. She says, my therapist told me something quote unquote interesting today. I have always had problems with my left ear, and I'm just getting over an ear infection in it. She said people with problems in their left ears usually have a passive defense behavior during conflict, and people with issues in their right ears usually have an aggressive defense behavior towards others in conflict. Hmm. I the only and this is a stretch. The only thing that comes to my mind as to how that could maybe be true would be your amygdala is on the right side of your brain, and it is kind of back here. So maybe if it's a right, uh, I don't know, it feels like that feels really like bro science. Um, if there's inflammation in your ear, that it could maybe kind of push on that, some sort of nerve or that center. I don't know. That's the connection that I could see would be there, but then that wouldn't explain the left ear having a passive defense. I don't know. I would be curious if you look that up to let me know. Really, Jennifer says she says she brought it up to her boyfriend and he said he'd heard about it too. Huh. I, I don't know. If anybody's just sitting there tonight and you're looking for things to Google, yeah, go for it. To see if you can find something more on that. We can all learn something tonight if that's the case. Lynn says, I need to go. Thanks to everyone for your honesty and your kind words. Dana, thank you for this live stream. I've missed being here, but I'll be back. Virtual hugs to all. Well, good night, Lynn. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Totally. UNA says, you can be kind and compassionate, but not anyone's supply or moral compass. That's on them and doesn't make you unkind, rejecting being someone else's supply. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Spot on. Camilla says, I really like that, thinking of boundaries in terms of setting expectations. Well, good. She says, thank you. Yeah, I hope that that helps, kind of thinking it. It is, I think the reason I think that can be easier is it feels like it's more team oriented. It doesn't feel so punishing. And I mean, of course, we know that boundaries, it's not about punishing the other person, right? It's about being self-protective. Uh, but when we're starting to kind of uh, we're get these practice these skills, it it can be really challenging. So yeah, I hope that thinking of them in terms of setting expectations to kind of takes that pressure off and you realize you're not just doing this for you, but you're doing it for them too. It helps to create kind of set set yourself up for success and create some more of these like win-win type situations where possible. Gareth says, well, I have tinnitus in both ears, which is the ringing in your ears. He says, I guess I'm just doomed. Yeah. Yeah. I guess so. Oh boy. Let's see. Sarah asks, what do you think most keeps people leaving? Wait, what do you think keeps, what do you think most keeps people leaving relationships stuck? Oh, that is such a great question. It so varies from person to person. Um, if I had to, if I had to pick one, I would say real identifying abuse for what it is. So just getting that validation. That is probably the hardest thing. Um, because again, we all have this idea of what an abusive person looks like and what they act like. And the reality is that's generally wrong. Most abusive people, they can have friends, they can be fun, they can be funny, they can be likable, they can um, smile, like animals can like them, children can like them, other people can like them. There's this stereotype out there, I think, of this abusive person that looks abusive, that looks really mean and crotchety and abusive, and that they're that way all of the time. And so for that person who's in the abusive relationship, it can it can be very confusing because they're like, gosh, you know what, um, man, this person, there's times where things are just really really awful and they're really cruel to me, but then there's other times that we have a great time together, and everything seems to kind of be back on track. This is the same thing with an abusive parent or an abusive boss or abusive friend. It's not abusive 100% of the time. So being able to identify and get that validation, because here's the thing too. So with that, when a person's in a situation like that, there's a lot of confusion going on. and they're trying to make sense of it. They're probably reaching out to other people. And um, odds are they're running into the limiting beliefs of others that are telling that, or a lot of what I call well-intended bad advice from other people, which is, oh, well, uh, gotta just get, gotta start going to church as a couple, or gotta, whatever, like just all kinds of advice that doesn't address the issue and it doesn't heal the pain. And so when abusive behavior is justified or minimized, or oh, this person had a bad childhood, you got to be more compassionate, or they they really didn't mean that, and you got to forgive and forget, like these kinds of things. It's just very, very damaging. It causes all kinds of doubt and confusion in that person, which kind of leads them to go back and stay in the relationship. So there's that piece of it, but then finances is also a very real one. um, Religion also is a factor for a lot of people. Culture is a factor. Some cultures don't, really, really frown upon divorce. You're basically kind of turning yourself into like a social pariah if you get a divorce. uh, Same thing with religion. If you get a divorce in certain faiths, then there's really this huge stigma against that. um, and you can be ostracized from your church. um, like I said, finances is, I think that's probably one of the top ones, right behind the identifying an abusive relationship for what it is. And a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, especially if people have kids. It's really difficult to um, or it's really challenging to be like, okay, well, I'm going to try to leave not just me, but with my 3 kids, and maybe you only have one car, or you don't, even if you had a job, it's like, okay, well, now if you're going to leave with 3 kids, let's say they're all under the age of 10, what are you going to do for childcare? So there's so many. And how, not only what are you going to do for childcare, how are you going to pay for it? Because for a lot of people, paying for childcare, they're basically working just to pay for childcare. So then it's sort of like, well, then it's not worth working you know if I make $1,500 a month, my childcare is $1,500 a month. I'm just eating soup with a fork here. So um, yeah, there's diminished uh, diminished support system. Oftentimes, people in abusive relationships, they've lost contact with friends and family, or their family and friends have distanced themselves because they're just exhausted by it. They can't go through it anymore. Um, uh, yeah, there's a lot of very real, hurdles to overcome. If anybody listening is in this situation and they're feeling overwhelmed, I just want to encourage you, please consider calling your local domestic violence agency. Most of them have advocates there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I would say the vast majority, if not all of the places, advocates can help you come up with a safety plan. They can help you explore your options. If they've been trained well, they're going to come from a place of non-judgment. They're not going to try to push you into leaving. They're not going to um, nothing. It's about you and your terms and trying to explore like what's best for you. So that's a wonderful resource out there. A lot of domestic violence agencies also have very free or low cost counseling, which is another thought. So, okay, so let me scroll here. Has anybody looked up the ear thing? Changing my life says, yeah, culture and religion pounced on me. And people still don't get my childcare situation. Just work. Okay, well, what about my kids? Yeah, I mean, it's like that's the thing. It's one thing to kind of armchair quarterback somebody else's life, right? And be like, oh yeah, that's what you need to do. You just need to, cut off contact, and you just need to leave and do this. Well, okay, it's not that simple. Like, there's a lot of factors at play, and um, that can be really frustrating when other people can be so kind of nonchalant about it and just offer up like a very, oh well, yeah, this is what you just leave, you just do this, and it's like, well, it's not that easy. There's more steps to take. The steps can be taken. It's but it's sometimes there kind of needs to be more of a plan in place, and um, it's not easy by any stretch. By any stretch, it's a lot like leaving a cult. It really is, and the level of people, people that just don't understand after you leave, um, or that think that you're the problem because they've been lied to. It just kind of it can feel like one hurdle after another, and uh, but you're not alone. And I guess just know that, like, you're not alone, and you can get through this. You can move forward. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. So this is why, I don't know, I mentioned I started doing this. It's a text service. It's free. You can sign up for it by texting the words "I thrive," all one word, to the number 22999. And I send out like words of encouragement 3 to 4 times a week. And it's just simply that. You can unsubscribe anytime. It goes to your phone. And sometimes it just kind of helps kind of carry a person through if they're needing some extra reminders, and yeah, just words of encouragement. So okay, let's see, let me scroll here. Yeah, I would agree with that. Kashi says, don't blame religion if your partner didn't uphold the true values of treating their partner according to their religion. That's a very valid point. I think there's a lot of people out there that are like, um, um, that profess to be of a certain faith, but then like they don't, there's no moral code. Like, they're just out running the streets and doing, just leaving a trail of chaos and mayhem behind them. And it's like, uh, I don't know like what book you're reading, but that's not what we do here, at all. Like, in this religion, in society, uh you name it. So there's lots of people. There's a saying out there that the best hiding place for evil is behind good. And there's a lot of truth in that, in terms of people um, kind of creating or getting involved in um, uh, seemingly good causes or religion or whatever it might be. But really, it's either it's because it's a good hiding spot for them because they're real predatory, or they're trying to convince themselves that they really are deep down a good person. So you gotta can't assume that just because somebody has the same faith as you, that they have the same moral code. Their actions will show you what moral code they have. So okay, let's see. Let me scroll here. Let's see. Bay BS says, my narcissist claimed to be the prodigal son and told me he was giving me the opportunity for forgiveness. Yes, I think there's quite a few people here probably tonight that have heard something very similar. It's that. I think what you're seeing right there is kind of the epitome of narcissism. It's that inability to accept any accountability or responsibility for their own behavior. And so it's sort of like, well, in their mind, it's like, well, I'm justified in every way that I treated you because don't you see that you're the problem? Because in their mind, it's just such an immature, stunted way of viewing the world. But in their mind, it's like, well, I felt angry, and so I lashed out at you. Therefore, that's justified. I I don't know. You weren't home, like you were out with your sister on Friday night. So then I was uh, lonely and horny and bored, and so I went out and cheated. If you'd been home, I don't know, things probably would have been different. Like that, it doesn't work that way. Somebody with um, kind of boundaries and breaks, I guess, like breaks on their behavior, understands that it's okay to feel how you feel. Like we all feel a wide variety of ways, but it's not okay to let's just then, um, do whatever. Like there's limits to that. But they don't see that. And so as a result, you'll get statements like that of, well, I'm going to give you the opportunity for forgiveness because they can't admit that what they did is wrong. They will not own their stuff, or at least they won't sincerely own their stuff. And a lot of people, that's really does a number on a person's mind. It's like, well, gosh, am I the problem? Like, am I making a big deal out of things? Like, I don't know. This is really weird. Like, I don't think so, but I just want to have peace in my life, you know? Like I don't even need to necessarily be right. I just want peace in my life. And it can kind of seem like we're taking the high road of like, okay, well, I guess I'll just apologize cuz I'd rather be happy than right, kind of a thing. That's another one of those statements that can get twisted out of context. Um, and the next thing we know, we're apologizing for something that we didn't do and that we were actually on the receiving end of. So we're apologizing for being abused to the abusive person. It's like, what? I mean, it just spins your head around. Christine asks, isn't that gaslighting on their part? We were talking about this yesterday in the live stream. There's uh, and I guess it like it helps to kind of clarify that. I was trying to kind of make the point that the term gaslighting, it originated, the original term points to kind of an intentional and malicious erosion of another person's reality. So it would be something like a person, you leave your car keys on the table and then they move your car keys. They take them and they put them in your jacket pocket. And then you're like, "Hey, where are the keys?" They're like, "What? What are you talking about? I never saw any keys." Like that would be gaslighting. Um, so in a more like conversational sense, that situation could be gaslighting, where they're denying, well, what do you mean? We didn't have a fight. That No, there's nothing for us to, there was no argument. That wasn't any big deal. It could be gaslighting. It could also be them. Um, it could also, they might not necessarily be intentional or malicious with that. Like they could be in denial or, um, yeah, just kind of in denial about their part in it or how they feel. I was given the example yesterday about my partner noticed that I was doing something similar with him. So I would have, uh, like, would be upset, for example, and um, he would say, "Well, are you upset? Like, are you angry?" I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm fine." But I was upset. I didn't want. Here's the thing: like hindsight being what it is, is I didn't realize that I was upset in the moment because I was trying to deny those feelings. I was trying to suppress them. And because I didn't want to feel them, I didn't want to discuss them. I didn't want to talk about them. I didn't want him to realize that I was feeling that way either. And he kind of was like, this isn't cool. Like, if you're upset, like, just at least admit that you're upset, because it's kind of like gaslighting. It's, you're very clearly upset, but your actions are showing one thing. You're kind of quiet, you're sulking, you're kind of avoiding me, um, but your words say another. And realizing, oh my gosh, you're right. That's it's not what I was doing. It wasn't with malicious intent at all, and it wasn't even intentional. It was more of just this subconscious stuff that I was like caught up in on my end. But then once I, he brought it to my attention, it was like, okay, no, I need to really work to getting more in tune with how I feel and at least owning it. And even if I don't want to discuss it, being able to say, hey, you know what? I'm feeling however I'm feeling. I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling mad, uh, or I'm feeling a mix of emotions right now. I don't really want to talk about it at this moment. Like, let me gather my thoughts. Can we talk about it later, or can we talk about it tomorrow? That's that's it. So, uh, yeah. So I guess the point of that is sometimes there's a whole kind of continuum as far as the denying of um, kind of what's going on. It can be benign and kind of more on the subconscious level, to all the way to like malicious, intentional, and sadistic. So, okay. Um, oh boy. Yeah. Christine says, my ex husband and his father did this all the time. They try to make others think that they're crazy. They'd hide things or throw things out and say, I did it, or that it never happened, etc. Yeah, that kind of stuff really uh, is incredibly damaging, incredibly damaging. So let's. Monica says, my worst experience with gaslighting was my ex telling me, what are you seeing? When I told him to pick up the coffee on the table. I really thought I was going insane. Wow. Yeah. I had this guy that I dated in high school. I don't even remember anymore what the context was. I don't know if I saw him. I mean, this was like back before internet, back before cell phones. I don't know if I saw him out with another girl or like what the context was, but I confronted him about it, and he made the comment, well, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And I believed him. I believed him over whatever that situation was, whatever I saw, because it just didn't cross my mind, uh, like that somebody would lie. I just was very trusting and very naive. It just was not even on my radar. I, you know, it's unfortunate. So, I guess I, at that time, well, even for a long time after that, was still operating from that standpoint of, if you want to go be with other women, like, just break up with me. Just let me know. It's, why be in a relationship if you just want to go around and sleep with a bunch of other women? That just didn't make any sense to me. It didn't dawn on me until really probably I met Jack, that some people just want it all. Like, they want that, the safety and stability of a, you know, safe, stable home life, and they want to go run the streets. So, that's that was news to me. And that might sound really naive, but that it was. Um, yeah, that's a good point. Jennifer says, I was watching American Horror, The Family Next Door yesterday on Netflix, and Shanann Watts seemed to be trying so hard to quote unquote do what it took to keep her husband in their marriage. But Chris still cheated anyways. And the next thing you know, her and her kids are dead. It's like not in any way her fault. But when you're a victim of this in the moment, you may think it's your fault for your partner cheating, but it's really not. Right. Yeah, exactly. She, I think, was operating from the standpoint of trying to find a reasonable, rational explanation. I don't think she realized he was cheating, but she could feel him pulling away. Of course, we all know that, yeah, he had been having this ongoing long affair with this other woman. Um, so she's thinking, okay, well, I'm going to spice things up in my marriage. Maybe he's feeling overwhelmed because we have two little kids and now one on the way. Um, you know, uh, like how do I turn things around? And yeah, it breaks my heart because it just wasn't even on her radar that things were going to go as bad as they did and as quick as they did. It's just heartbreaking. I think it's kind of important back to the cheating thing, that to realize that if somebody's cheating on you, there's not a depth of emotion there. And there might be, like, it could possibly be rekindled in time. I'm not saying that, but at the moment, especially if they've had an ongoing pattern of cheating, um, if they've had an ongoing pattern of cheating, or if they're cheating in the moment, there's not that emotional investment in you. And if anything, they've probably distanced themselves emotionally from you. And because of that, a person can become very unpredictable, and you can very quickly become the enemy in all of this. And it's amazing the mental gymnastics that a person can do to convince themselves of all kinds of stuff that's not even like completely rewriting reality. It's just wild. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with you. It has their own unresolved stuff, their own level of denial, their own, um, you name it, going on. The human brain is really wild. Monica said, yeah, can you imagine throwing your own kids in an oil tank? I think worse is it wasn't even like that doesn't it doesn't even get any worse, but um that he basically like stuffed them in there. It just, the more I kept finding out about that case, the more it just, you think, okay, this is it. This is the worst of the worst. And then boom, new low. And then boom, new low. And then boom, new low. And it's just the moral depravity is just jaw dropping of like, wow, there's no end. There's no end here. I can't imagine how do you sleep at night? Like, how do you just turn your brain off and not see those images every single time you close your eyes? It's mind boggling. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Yeah, Monica says, I remember when I heard about it, I had gone to the temple to pray for her and her kids. I just couldn't take it. I would cry so much just thinking about how somebody could be so evil. Yeah. Yeah, it's beyond. There's, when you think about our parents and like what they're going through, what they'll be carrying, the pain that they'll be carrying, all of it. It's beyond awful. And mm, yeah. Let's see. Let me scroll here. Baby asks, why do you think a counselor would not want to admit these classic situations are emotional abuse and gaslighting? It could be any number of things. It could be that they're not really that familiar with emotional abuse or gaslighting. It could be that sometimes a counselor or a therapist avoids kind of defining a situation that a person's in. And it's going to depend on their therapeutic approach. So they might avoid defining it so that the person can, and instead they might kind of explore concepts around that, like boundaries, self-esteem, self-love, helping that person kind of get clear on um, what makes a healthy relationship for them, and what are they kind of their thoughts about that, these kinds of things. Or they might, here's the other thing, sometimes using words, very emotionally charged words like emotional abuse or gaslighting, things like this, can cause a lot of resistance in a person. And the result can be, there's pushback, they get very defensive, and then they start backpedaling. And so the result of that is they end up talking themselves into staying in the relationship. So if a therapist says, oh, well, it sounds like what you're describing is emotional abuse, and if the person's not ready to hear that, they might say, like, well, I don't know if I'd really go quite like that far. I mean, my spouse or my mother, whoever it might be, they really had a rough childhood. I really think that they were doing everything that they possibly could. Frankly, I'm not perfect either. I had been drinking that night, and I said a few things that I shouldn't have, and then they start getting defensive. And when that happens, it kind of just shuts everything down, because that connection between therapist and client it's now kind of fractured. So there's kind of this proceeding with caution when it comes to things like that, and kind of going slow to kind of feel out how that person's level of defensiveness when it comes to that, when it comes to hearing, okay, well, it sounds like what you're describing is, it's emotional abuse. And so maybe, like, let's talk a little bit more about that. And because it's for them, again, most people have this idea of what emotional abuse is, and oftentimes it's only a snippet of what emotional abuse really is. So that person in therapy might be very resistant, but they might be resistant because their therapist saying, oh, this is emotional abuse, doesn't match their understanding of what emotional abuse is. So you have to kind of also explore, where is the resistance coming from? And like, it can be quite the process. Um, and if a person's not ready to leave, then they're going to continue to offer up all kinds of justifications for why this other person does what they do. And um, yeah, yeah. So personally, I find it important and I find it helpful to um, call situations, to call them for what they are, and but then to also let a person, then to kind of have that discussion, or I should say, kind of just kind of go into that discussion about what you're describing sounds like emotional abuse. But, and then depending on their response, then kind of going into like, let's talk a little bit about that, because what a lot of people think that, because that can feel like a heavy word, and what a lot of people think emotional abuse is and what it actually is are tend to be two different things. And then kind of then going into it. Knowledge is, I think, a power in a lot of things. I have found too that information like handouts and videos and things like that really help. It helps too in the sense that it decreases defensiveness in another person, because they know it's not directed at them, right? Like it's a handout that I happen to have, or it's a video that was made 3 years before I ever met you. So it's not about um, it's not a personal attack. It's so it's easier for people, I think, to consume information when it's not so, when it doesn't feel like a personal attack and directed at them. But at a minimum, I would say, if what you're experiencing is emotional abuse, and you're aware of that this is emotional abuse or psychological abuse, and you have a therapist or a life coach or whoever who is kind of justifying it, minimizing it, or doesn't identify it, if you bring it up and they're, kind of skirting the issue, then I would encourage you, maybe it's time to find a different therapist, because um, you're going to need somebody who's familiar with abuse to help you to identify it and to heal from it. So, okay, let's see here. Right. A truth seeker says, yeah, narcissists are emotionally stunted due to their defense mechanisms. Yep. Um, let's see here. Bay Baby says the counselor was actually the marriage counselor and kept saying that she had to deal with a narcissist saying he was suicidal. Yeah. Well, I guess I can see that, because that does tend to take um, priority over things. If this was an ongoing thing, then hopefully she was able to realize, okay, this is more of a manipulation or a deflection. Like he doesn't really want to talk about what's going on here. He wants to kind of um, say, "Oh, divert attention, make himself the victim," kind of hopefully eliciting pity and sympathy. Kind of gets him out of the hot seat, kind of a thing. So, okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Um, yeah, that's another great way to put it. Truth Seeker says, yeah, NPD, it's a sort of a psychological blindness that the narcissist sees as a strength. It's mind bending. Yeah, the rest of us, I think normal, healthy, like well adjusted people, don't see it as a strength, right? We see it, we're like, okay, wow, this person's really compensating. Like this is, they have a very inflated sense of self-esteem, that this is not healthy, and that, the grandiosity, the bravado, the arrogance, the haughty attitude, the inability to take criticism of any kind, the level of defensiveness, uh, all of it strikes, I think, kind of more balanced people as, wow, like this is really emotionally immature. Like, what is going on here? But for the narcissist, they think, uh, I am so powerful. I'm so superior. This attitude of kind of the one up type position. I'm better than everybody else. And, uh, but like you said, there's this blindness to it where they're like, well, and everybody else knows that I'm better too. But the reality is most people are like rolling their eyes, like, oh boy, this person is something else. And they can't see it. And that's just due to their really fragile ego. Because it's all defense, it's all defenses from them. Christine says, yeah, narcissists seem to view kindness as weakness. Yes, they do. Yes. Or if there is kindness, it's a tool to get what they want. Like, I think kindness just for kindness' sake uh, is a very foreign concept to them. Because for them, kindness equals vulnerability, and vulnerability equals weakness, which, this is what I was saying earlier. Like, the reality is we all have vulnerabilities because we're all human, and our vulnerabilities are going to grow and change as we grow and change. There is no such thing as getting rid of all of our vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities aren't a bad thing. It's, in large part, it's how, it's one of, I think, kind of one of the more beautiful ways that we're able to connect with other people, is because we understand the pain that can go along with certain vulnerabilities. And we see that in others, and it can really bring out the best in people, of wanting to protect others that are more vulnerable than us, or to look out for them, or to treat them with kindness and compassion, because we know what it feels like to maybe be in their shoes or in similar shoes. And but for narcissists, it's um, this anger and this defensiveness of, um, there's no weakness. There was an image, it was kind of being passed around as a joke, like a meme, a couple years ago, and I almost started like getting choked up when I saw it, because it's child abuse. And it was this little boy. He was maybe not more than 5 years old, and he was being filmed, and I don't know, like, I don't know what happened beforehand, but this little kid was acting really tough. And it was sort of like, hey, come on, like, look at me. He's like, what? There's no weakness here. There's no weakness here. It's only strength. And of course, he's kind of flexing, and he's got these, cute little 5-year-old kid arms. And he's ready to go. And he was kind of had the demeanor of like, I'm a soldier. I don't feel feelings. Like, I don't feel sadness. I don't feel anything. It's just strength. There is no weakness. And that's the sign of an abused child right there. Somebody that's been taught that it's not okay, that it's not okay um, to feel anything other than to be strong. And it's heartbreaking. It's not funny. So yeah, that's very common. And that's that mentality. And I think a lot of that mentality for narcissists, it also kind of leads to this, um, well, it leads to this inability to be emotionally available, because emotional availability equals vulnerability, which equals weakness, which they're not comfortable with. But there's also, this kind of lone wolf attitude that they have, where, um, they just, they'd rather be on their own, kind of a thing. So, okay, so let me scroll up here. Oh yeah, Truth Seeker says, "Oh, like little kid arms, little popcorn biceps." Haha. Yeah, that's what it was. He was a cutie patootie. And it just makes me so sad that he was picking up these messages, I don't know, from other men or probably, and maybe even other women, about what a boy should be like. And um, it's so damaging because, we all have feelings and they're there for a reason, and none of them are insignificant. I mean, it's so damaging to somebody to limit their emotional range like that early on. And um, because we feel sad, we feel hurt, we feel embarrassed, we feel all of these feelings, uh, and like the rest of our feelings, they're there, they generally have a message for us, and it's important that we receive whatever message they're trying to tell us, instead of just not feeling them and disowning those feelings. Sarah says, Dana, best tips for getting used to being single, attacking loneliness, trying to build myself up and grow up fast, to not stay in, um, I think, and not stay in victim mode. Well, okay. So I would say spending that energy and building up a life that you love. So getting clear on, for you, what does that look like? What does living a life that you love involve? And thinking about it in terms of kind of different aspects, like a more like a holistic approach. So what does it look like on a physical level, an emotional level, um, spiritual level, a financial level, uh, you know, you name it, kind of across the board, different dimensions of your life. And thinking about, okay, who do you want to be in this next chapter of your life? That's kind of the cool thing. So when we think about our life is like it's a giant book that we're the author of. And so we get to decide how long certain chapters are, and for the most part the people that are in them. So and in what capacity those people are in those chapters. Are they supporting characters or are they minor characters? Or did they just kind of vanish like 3 chapters ago? You know, so thinking about, okay, what is this next chapter of your life going to look like? Maybe taking up, this is the cool thing too, is we have the internet. I was just talking, I think it was Angie, maybe before we went live. We were talking yesterday about just how cool it is, like the technology and being able to just access resources and everything that we have these days. We're so fortunate for that. So um, you can learn, if you want to, I don't know, any skill these days. You want to learn how to knit, or you want to learn how to paint, or even play an instrument, uh, speak a foreign language. There's so much stuff on YouTube that's free that you can learn how to do. That's a good use of time. Kind of cultivating a hobby. Um, Increasing your support system. Again, a little bit more challenging because of COVID, but meetup.com is fantastic, um, normally. And I would say different online groups, kind of getting more involved in those. Um, Facebook oftentimes has community groups for people like in a certain area that can be worth checking out. Really, Meetup, that's kind of my favorite go to. It's, you have to kind of go into it with no expectations because it's the general public and it's a mixed bag. Sometimes you'll meet really great people, sometimes you're going to meet some really strange people. And kind of going into it, and that's the cool thing with Meetup is, if you're, and I would encourage people, join like 2 dozen different meetups, anything that even sounds remotely interesting to you, and maybe even a couple that don't, just to get out there and try it, just to try something new. Joining these different groups, and that way you've got, again, I don't know how stuff is working with COVID, but before COVID, I mean, you could fill up your calendar no problem with all kinds of different events of like you could go cheese making or um, camping or brewing your own beer or um, going to new restaurants with people. There's women's groups, like singles groups, or I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there. So that can be fun. The good thing is, at a minimum, you're getting to do this one activity that hopefully you'll enjoy regardless, like even if you don't end up clicking with anybody there. But that the thing too, it's easier I think in meetup groups because everybody there, you're not the third wheel. Like everybody's that's there is there to be social, they're there to meet other people and to try new things, and so people are a lot more welcoming and open and friendly than you would find if you're joining um, I think different types of groups where you might be the only new person, kind of a thing. So, yeah, other tips for getting used to being single, I would say getting clear with yourself about the things that you enjoy with being single. So, I know when I was single, one of the things that I really enjoyed is, well, I'm always cold. So I had during the winter, I had these like fleece, really thick sheets and a super thick comforter. And it was you know, absolutely not a guy friendly bed at all. Cause it was really soft and plush and any guy like would probably burst into flames. Like it was warm for me and I'm always cold. So for a guy, when I was married or when I was dating, it was like like no guy could handle that. So I loved being single. I'm like, oh, it's so nice to just have my fuzzy sheets and my super fluffy comforter, and I can just sit in bed and drink a glass of wine and read a book, and you know, and I can have this, and that's just so nice. Or maybe doing things you that you like to do that your ex didn't like to do. So let's say if he didn't like for you to wear makeup, then maybe really embracing the fact that now you can wear makeup and you don't have to listen to him bitch about it. Or he didn't like, I don't know, romantic comedies, and going out and watching some romantic comedies, really kind of just declaring your freedom and spreading your wings, you know. So let's see here. Let me scroll. Jennifer says, yeah, fuzzy sheets are the best and can be way warmer than they look. Yeah, they really are. They trap body heat like nobody's business. Bay BA says, I've been able to get closer to my friends and family again too. That's also freeing. Yes. Yes. Doing things that you love. Changing My Life says, I love fluff and warm. Yes, it's wonderful. Um, Mothering Hand says, yeah, Dana, I joined several groups, only met once, but it was very easygoing, no pressure. Yeah. Yeah. Christine makes the great comment, having or fostering pets can be very healing too. Jack says, it depends on the rom-com. He says, I don't get most of them, or really I can watch once or twice, but 4 to 5, no, sorry. At Hufflemom. That's funny. Yeah, I'm not a huge rom-com person either. Actually, you know what my jam is? My show is what is it called? The Best British Baking Show. Is that what it's called? The Best British Baking Show. I flip and love that show. It is so wholesome and just so cute, and it's the most like real reality show I've ever seen, and it's just cool to see what real people that love baking Like to see them get together and they're just so supportive of each other. I just love it. Love, love, love that show. Nobody, um, very few people like in my inner circle like that show or that can tolerate, binge watching it. I just love it. Monica says, Dana, why do I feel like I can't sit down during meditation? My emotions are way, way too scary. Well, I think you answered your own question. I think that's exactly why. One of the ways that we can avoid feeling our feelings is through busyness. And it's that staying busy. It's and because it can be difficult to be still, because when we're still, thoughts can start surfacing, emotions can start surfacing. And if we're using busyness to kind of eat up our time as a distraction from how we feel, then it can be really uncomfortable when we don't have that. We take that away. And then we're left with, oh, okay, these are some of the feelings that are surfacing that I've been trying to avoid. Yes, thank you, Gareth. He says, yeah, it's the British Bake Off show. Yes. Yeah, I just love it. Wonderful, wonderful. Divine, sorry, my nose is itching tonight. Divine Miss asks, is there a difference between EMDR and hypnotherapy? Yes, yes, there is. Hypnotherapy it's hypnosis, whereas EMDR isn't. Um, and there's different types of kind of approaches with hypnotherapy. Well, I guess you could say there's different types of approaches with EMDR too, but not really. EMDR is kind of the the same thing. Hypnosis, it's kind of more, um, I guess, kind of more free form. It, it can be, I guess, it can be more exploratory, is what I'm trying to say. EMDR, it tends to be there's a focus on a particular event, um, and really drilling down into that and exploring that, and then kind of identifying the limiting belief that we've picked up surrounding that event, and then working towards replacing or overriding, I should say, that limiting belief with a more empowered belief. And when we do that, a lot of those emotions, it's also involves flooding the um, kind of working memory, whereas hypnotherapy doesn't do that. So hypnotherapy involves kind of like a deep state of relaxation to become suggestible. So you're kind of, the goal there is to connect more with like the subconscious mind. EMDR is not that. So yeah, some differences, but uh, yeah, some differences there. I think in terms of, well, and I guess hypnotherapy, it's kind of, kind of, kind of instilling different statements into a person's subconscious with the hopes of kind of them sticking, and then that kind of, and kind of planting those seeds in a person's subconscious that changes things. EMDR, it's like I said, it's not about the subconscious, it's about the conscious mind, and um, um, it's just it's a lot more direct. So Hufflemom asks, hey Dana, what time is it over here? It is 10:56 at night over here. Um, Gareth says Paul Hollywood is a bit of a cad, Dana. Yeah, he is. I would agree. I would agree. I still like I still like their dynamic. All of them. Even like the first season when they had Mary Berry on, um, and now the more recent seasons with who was it, Prue, and they now have a new guest judge and Paul Hollywood. No, maybe it's just Paul Hollywood and Prue. It's the new hosts that I'm thinking of. But yeah, I like their dynamic, and I like learning. I like when they explain things about, okay, this is what we're going for this one bakery thing, and this is kind of how it should look, and this is where this thing, this concept of this cake or this bread or whatever comes from, and they kind of have a little history to it. It makes it very interesting because I am, um, my baking skills are primitive at best, so it's interesting to what people come up with and all the different ways they interpret the recipes, and then when they do like the showstoppers, I think that's so cool. It's just seeing what people can come up with when they let their creativity run wild. I just really like that show. um Frisky Mix Minx asks, how do EMDR and CBT differ? Well, okay, so CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, it's cognitive behavioral therapy, it's the kind of the crux of it is that our um, thoughts, feelings, and actions are all interconnected. And so if we can change one, then we can change the other two. So you can change your thoughts if you want to change your feelings or your actions, or you can change your actions to change your thoughts and your feelings, or any combination thereof. With cognitive behavioral therapy, you often do have the desire, or not the desire, the goal is to kind of find some like different limiting beliefs. If you're focusing more on changing changing your thoughts, to change your feelings, to change your behavior. I am very cautious when it comes to CBT, especially when it comes, well, frankly, when it kind of comes to anything, but especially when it comes to trauma, because it's very easy to unintentionally gaslight somebody else. So, kind of, for example, a person, um, like it's just so easy. A person might come in and they might say something like, I went on this date last night and I just really I felt off. Like I was very guarded and very suspicious. I just really had a hard time kind of unwinding and you know, trusting this person. I was scared they were going to hurt me. Well, if you have somebody that practices CBT that really doesn't understand abuse, or that doesn't, they might understand abuse, but if they don't dig a little deeper, it's very easy to just jump to, oh, it's because the last relationship you were in is abusive. That's why you're feeling off like that. So let's change that thought to, this is an unsafe person, to um, to something else. We can work on like reframing that to, um, you know, I don't know, that nice people are safe people. Let's say something like that. So let's say this person you went on a date with was very polite. They were nice. On paper, they seemed really great. Like that, you would have absolutely no reason to have your internal alarms going off. But but they still were. Well, okay, that could be because of your previous trauma, but it could also be because there was something really off about that person. So that's why I really don't like that, because such a big part of healing from abuse involves a person learning to lean into and explore their thoughts and their feelings and their actions, not trying to reframe them, stop them, change them, any of that. Like leaning into that, because those carry a lot of information and a lot of messages about what's going on. So uh, those are my concerns with CBT. Uh, EMDR, it's it's you, the therapist and the client, you're exploring. It doesn't even have to be just trauma, but it's kind of any uncomfortable experience. So let's say a person has a fear of public speaking, and that's what they want to do some EMDR on. And so they're talking about that. Then you would kind of explore, okay, well, what are the concerns about that? Or like, what's the worst part of this for you? And then it might be, okay, well, what if they laugh at me? Like, what if I'm not, um, what if I make a fool out of myself? And then you're kind of exploring, okay, well, what are some of the limiting beliefs around that? That uh, I don't deserve to be up here, or that I'm not worthy of being taken seriously, or, um, that I'll never be taken seriously, or whatever. Oftentimes you have to kind of, to, to, what I do is I write it out, and then like, okay, we'll, like, we don't need to just jump at the first one. Like, when you've hit that belief, when it strikes a chord in you, you're like, bingo, that's the one. So sometimes it takes kind of coming up with 7 to 10, or I don't know, 5 to 10, to really summarize, yeah, that's the feeling, or that's the belief. And then the same thing with coming up with a more empowered belief, one that feels like, okay, yeah, I think that feels like something that I want to steer into. And then it involves, there's eye movements, you're kind of holding on to a feeling, you're thinking about something, you're watching eye movements, or you're doing the tapping. And the whole point of that is to flood your working memory, to soften the emotional intensity of that feeling, so you can um, work to bring about the more empowered feeling. So thank you. Awful nonsense. Uh, Please pardon me for mothering you, my dear friend. It is 11 o'clock and you need your rest. Yes, you were very right. I know I look I look as tired as I feel, because I am. It's been a really long day today. So we'll wind up here in just a second. Then we'll do a guided meditation before we end for tonight. Oh, Gareth says, for the last 5 minutes, I've been trying to remove something from my phone screen. He's like, it's your hair. Yeah, my hair is kind of wild. I apologize. I was laying down just to put my feet up for a little bit before I did the live stream. And yeah, I look like I just rolled out of bed. So, we're just gonna go with it. It's the new look. It's the new look. You guys didn't get the memo? Just kidding. Um, so let's see. That's a very true. Jack says a therapist could base all of their treatment approaches on CBT, but there's no therapists I know that do EMDR and nothing else. Right. Normally, EMDR is more of like an add-on. So it's something that you become certified after you're licensed. And so when you're licensed, when you go through the process of getting licensed, you're you're learning about all of these different kind of therapeutic modalities. And you're kind of the cool, it's fun because like you're exploring, okay, well, which one kind of resonates with me, and the and what kind of people do I want to work with, and what kind of challenges do I want to work with. And then it kind of takes trial and error, and then you kind of narrow it down. And um, so CBT is kind of I would say, like the uh, standard, kind of the basic one that, but really, I would say the vast majority of practitioners out there would probably define their approach as more eclectic, even though that's kind of frowned upon. But it's eclectic in meaning that they draw from a handful of different approaches. That, and having an eclectic approach is kind of come under fire because it's like, well, then um, then you're maybe you're kind of not good at any of them since you're drawing upon all or a handful of them. But and I can see that to some extent, but I think it just depends. I think it depends on how much you specialize. And you know I just think you need more than one tool in your toolkit. It's like, having a different approach when it comes to grief work. CBT, maybe not the best for grief work or for trauma. Uh, EMDR is good. There's um, ACT. There's somebody was telling me I don't know, about a couple months, I don't know, a while ago, about a therapy called CPT, which I had never heard of before. That's helps with trauma. So there's lots of different things out there. Um, you know, so yeah, but I think really at the end of the day, with whoever you go with, life coach, therapist, you name it, it's in large part kind of getting the results that you're looking for is really going to really depend on the relationship that you're able to cultivate with that person. So being able to communicate honestly, like openly, honestly, sincerely, directly with them, and uh, that you're able to talk about, hey, the, like if things feel like you're kind of stagnant, or if they're not moving forward, or if you have questions about something, or whatever it might be, that you're able to talk about it with them instead of having kind of a one-sided dynamic where kind of they hold all the power because they're the professional and that you're just along for the ride. Especially after abuse, it's really, really important that there's that dynamic of mutuality and not that power difference there. So you want somebody that's more of a team member, not somebody that's, you know, a dictator and driving your treatment and you're just kind of along for the ride. It's important that you get your power back and rediscover your voice. And ideally, therapy should be a place where those skills are role modeled and practiced and encouraged. So I would look more for that, I guess. Um, yeah. So okay. Um, so I guess with that said, how about let's go into our uh, guided meditation. Oh, actually, two, two more things real quick. Jennifer says, could EMDR help a phobia? I have an intense insect phobia. Potentially. Yeah. I mean, actually, yeah, there is EMDR for phobias. Um, Normally, kind of exposure therapy tends to help with phobias, but yeah, EMDR can as well. You might want to talk to the practitioner if you do decide to go that route ahead of time and say that that's what you're looking for to see if they have practice with that. And then Ava says, I can honestly say having toxic people out of my life has created so much peace. That is so awesome. Yay, you. Yay, you for sure. So, okay. So, with that said, we'll just kind of wind down and so get comfortable. whatever that might feel like, wherever you might be, if you're in a chair, if you're lying down. Um, take some time. This is all for you, where you can just breathe and unwind. Just be present in your body and in this moment. Feeling the weight of your body with each breath you take, allowing your muscles to relax and allowing yourself to settle into this moment. And releasing any anxiety about the future or any regret or painful memories of the past. Just being here in this moment. And continuing to breathe. With each breath, allowing your chest to just easily and effortlessly rise and fall. Bringing that breath down into the bases of your lungs, down into your stomach. Allowing your stomach to rise and fall with each of those deep breaths. Reminding yourself that you are here in this moment. Again, releasing any anxiety about the future, and releasing any regret or painful memories of the past. And you're fully here in this moment. And in this moment, you are safe, you are supported. There is so much that is good and right about you, and good and right about life. And continuing to breathe. Bringing those breaths down further past your stomach, into your hips, down into your thighs, your knees, your calves, and your feet, down to the tips of your toes. Through your chest, your arms, your forearms, your hands, and your fingers. Up to your neck, through the back of your head. Feeling your whole body rise and fall easily and effortlessly with each breath. Doing a scan of your body, noticing if you're storing stress in any areas, if there's any muscle tightness. And sending those breaths to that area. And imagining these breaths untying these knots like a shoelace, loosening them up, allowing your body to become heavier and heavier as you sink into relaxation. Taking comfort in that you are safe, that you are secure, that you are here in this moment, and that there is so much that is good and right with you, and that there is still so much that is good and right with your life. And taking comfort in knowing that you are capable and that you are wise, that you are powerful, that you are worthy, that there is so much that is good and right with you. And turning your attention inward now and feeling kind of that inner light that's within us all, feeling that inner light within you, or maybe seeing it in your mind's eye. That beautiful, comforting, healing glow. Maybe starting in your chest. And perhaps it's the size of maybe a small flickering flame, or perhaps it's the size of a tennis ball. But with each breath, sending oxygen to that light, having it grow larger and larger. That beautiful, calm, healing, restorative, regenerative light. Having it and watching it grow as it expands through your body, making its way in and around every single little cell in your body, repairing and restoring, repairing and restoring, returning you back to optimal health. And feeling connecting to everything that's good and right within you and good and right within the world. Taking comfort in that you are not alone, that you are capable, you are competent, you are wise, that no lesson is lost on you, that you've come a long way. You are powerful. Imagine that light extending beyond your body, beyond your fingertips, beyond your toes. Connecting to things that are good and right and in the universe. Being a part of that wonderful, healing, regenerative energy. Noticing that feeling of bliss and of peace and of calm inside, knowing that that's there all of the time for you and you can access it whenever you want. And when you're ready, come on back and open your eyes. So, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. I appreciate all of your questions. I appreciate, um, yeah, just everything. I appreciate your presence and everybody supporting each other here in the chat. It's awesome to see. And of course, admins, thank you so much for your time and your help and everything that you do in the chat. It's always much appreciated. So, with that, oh, Bill got here just as we're ending. Well, hi, Bill, and we're glad you could join us for a little bit, uh, but we'll see you next week. So, as always, just lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal. So,